Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
And welcome back. Having a coach is fantastic. Having a leadership coach, business coach, it's great. It's going to help you move your business along if you have the right one. Now, now pair science with that and the right coach, you're ready for takeoff in a big way. That's the man sitting right here. He is a Marshall Goldsmith certified executive coach and founder of Coaching for Relevance. The way he rolls is leadership and the importance of it, the right type of leadership connected to science. Let's learn more today. Randy Swaim is on the program. Hey, Randy.
Hey, nice to be here again, Steve. Great to be with you.
Yeah, good having you back. We've been talking the last couple of weeks about leadership, loosely touching neuroscience. I believe we're going to look a little bit deeper into neurotransmitters in the brain today.
Yeah, and that's what we'll do, because you remember 2 weeks ago we talked about the concept of true synergism, which does not mean that we're all exactly the same. We all think exactly the same and all that kind of stuff, because guess what? In a rapidly changing, unpredictable environment, for sure, some of your people may be aware of new factors coming on. And remember, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago and all that. And then last week, we tailored it to a little bit of a thing where realize that if you have 10 people on your team, guess what? The growth point or the growth opportunity for each one is a little different. It's not rote academic and stuff. And guess what? When you have people over here that see a factor coming on board and they're bringing it up, that may update your awareness in your smart people, but it also may increase their awareness in ways that they didn't expect, or whatever. So it's just something to think about when you talk about that concept that we've been talking about. But today we will specifically talk about some neuroscience aspects that leaders need to sort of be aware of, particularly when you're talking about the fact that true synergism does not mean that every one of your people is exactly the same. No, it doesn't. That's not true, and that rarely ever is true. And so how you're leading your team in such a way that becomes truly successful is key. And part of the understanding of that is this aspect of neuroscience. And we'll just kind of mention that here actually fairly quickly.
Well, how do you determine what motivates those on your team? Now, we say that everybody's different, right?
Yeah. And see the key on that, and that's actually a little bit of a dovetail into where I'm going with this. But the other part of that is, as a leader, if you don't know what truly motivates your individual people, you're not getting the job done. Because guess what? What motivates person, one over here may not be exactly what motivates person 3 and 4 or whatever, kind of thing. Because guess what? People are different. And in the as a leader, you have to have this mindset that understands who your team members are and what is it that's really driving them. Because if you can connect where you're going with that, guess what? They're going to want to, and they're going to take the steps forward, kind of thing. And if you think about that, I'll just mention this because this is a good insight into this, and I'll just sort of throw out this neuroscience aspect. And what it is, when you understand neuroscience, you understand that the brain has certain neurotransmitters that it uses based on what the processing is showing and what the brain is perceiving and all of that. And what a neurotransmitter is, it's a chemical that the brain releases to the body and the nervous system. Okay. And let me just give you a couple of examples of what each one is. Guess what? One of the neurotransmitters that the brain releases is norepinephrine. And that's the chemical that causes people to get into a fight or flight mindset, where it's like, I'm going to take this out, or get the heck out of here, kind of thing. That's norepinephrine. Okay. The other thing on this, when you're talking about neurotransmitters, another neurotransmitter that the brain releases is a chemical that's called dopamine. Okay. And there's the dopamine um, is the chemical that makes people feel proud and like somebody's going to pat on the back and all of that kind of thing. And there's another transmitter called oxytocin. And guess what? Oxytocin is the chemical that the brain reaches to sense you and I being connected as a team. I feel that. It's not just one I hope. I can experience that. That's sort of the oxytocin. And then there's another chemical that's referred to as serotonin. And what serotonin is, it's the chemical that makes somebody want to just relax and lay back and go, kind of thing, and rest, kind of thing. And so a lot of people don't realize that when your brain, processes the information in the frontal lobe and it sometimes rewires itself over several weeks kind of thing. But what the brain is experiencing and sensing and feeling, it will release the neurotransmitters and that will engender kind of what the person senses, feels, or experiences. And the thing I want to kind of mention, that we talked about that earlier, when the situation is not perfectly academic, that maybe you have some factors coming on over here, right? What do you want your people to be experiencing truly? Because here's the thing, it's not either or necessarily. Sometimes the brain can release some norepinephrine. Sometimes it can release some serotonin or some oxytocin or whatever along with it. And so your team member may be feeling a little bit of both at the time. And the bottom line is, do they have the mental clarity to understand which is more important? In a situation that has unique factors that are coming on scene that maybe you didn't expect, or half of your team didn't expect it, kind of thing. When those unexpected factors happen, to what extent does your team have that awareness of it? And also, I throw this out to a leader, that if you see people on your team that are responding with maybe an emotional situation or an emotional reaction or something that makes you think that one of those is becoming controlish, maybe norepinephrine. I will tell you, in fact, I shared this in my autobiography, and I think I mentioned it maybe once on the show some time back, but the two times in my life where I had to basically be ready to use my black belt in martial arts in public to defend somebody, I didn't have to. And my girlfriend, actually, at the time, that was a witness to the situation, came up to me when it was obviously all over and everything, and said, "Boy, one thing you could see." And I said, "What's that?" And he said, they understood, or they didn't know how to handle somebody who was outnumbered, but very calm, centered, and in control. They didn't know how to handle that. And you know what? When you talk about these things, guess what? If norepinephrine is taking charge and causing them to just want to do this, that may not be what your team needs. And as a leader, how are you going to get in and ask the right questions to get them responding to the right neurotransmitter for the situation that you have? Or perhaps find out, in what way do you help them kind of sense that I don't need to fight this? This is not something that's going to knock us off center. This is not that. And so there's a lot of aspects about that when you're talking about your leadership ability. And what I kind of throw out to people too is, when you're looking at this from a leadership standpoint, are you aware of these aspects? Because what happens with a lot of people that don't understand real leadership, if their person starts doing that, they think their job is to just come in and stop them and tell them what to do and get over here. That's not real leadership. Helping people grow and become, even as they overcome this situation. And as you know, so my autobiography talks about my life of overcoming and becoming and all of that. And how are you going to lead your team in a way so that some of your team members actually do that? And so I throw this out to that, just sort of a dovetail and an alignment there from what we talked about 2 weeks ago and last week also, that keep in mind that the neurotransmitters that the brain releases may be different on a number of your team members. Because guess what? This person may have a lot, just because of how they process it and what they're not aware of. This person may have norepinephrine pouring into his nervous system. This person may have some oxytocin or some vision on it that they don't have to do that. You may have somebody in your team that is being driven by that dopamine, where they're trying to just play control freak games with everybody on the team and disconnect everybody on the team and bring it under their control so that they can get a pat on the back kind of thing. And so all of these aspects of it, when you talk about the neuroplastician and the neuroscience aspect of it, as a leader, you got to at least have some understanding of what the brain is doing and what those neurotransmitters can do. Because I tell you what, if you're not aware of them, if your team's not aware of them and they don't sense it, if they're choosing norepinephrine rather than the oxytocin or whatever, because guess what? Oneness with your team and that real synergy with your team may be putting norepinephrine aside, possibly, depending on the situation and everything. And when you're talking about this aspect of it, like I said, if you're just trying to make it so that your team is all exactly the same, thinks exactly the same, does it exactly the same way every time, I don't have to say nothing because, that kind of thing, you're not getting the job done. Because guess what? Situations that your team encounters is not going to be purely academic and not superficial and not the same all the time. And so I just throw that out as some thoughts on this aspect of the neurotransmitters and just bringing some neuroscience awareness to it. Because guess what? It doesn't mean just one thing and nothing else. To what extent are you going to ask the right questions or to interact with your team in such a way that they put the norepinephrine aside when it's not as critical, and they bring in some oxytocin perhaps or whatever, or sometimes some serotonin because you're not ready to move yet. You don't want to get knocked off the center. You don't want to get knocked off the starting line kind of thing. And so this aspect of understanding the neurotransmitters and sort of what the brain does is so key when you're talking about being a leader, of understanding how you're really, really going to connect with your people in such a way that they understand that awareness and they employ the right thing at the right time to maximize the success. So it's just something to think about when you're talking about that we were talking about the last couple of weeks from a neuroscience standpoint and how that can play out. Because as a leader, are you leading your team in such a way that you're not just telling them what to do, you're not just going to rote academic things, but you're helping them understand that application when their brain releases it? Are they making the right decision? And are they processing it well? And all of that is very key. And that, like I said, that's just a neuroscience aspect and application of this to those kind of situations, particularly when it's just, what you don't want to do, and we said this the last 2 weeks, what you don't want to do is have your team just shut their brains off and do what we said we do. Because guess what? The factors aren't always going to be the same, and they're not always going to be exactly the same level. And are you making decisions in such a way that you're really reaching radical success? And are you aware of when those unexpected situations come on scene, or when, say, 2 out of your 7, team members are aware of this one thing when nobody else is? How do you really communicate in a way where you don't cause this problem with the neurotransmitters of, oh, well, we don't have to worry about that, kind of thing, as opposed to, okay, yeah, I see that out there. And you have a conversation about, do you think that's going to have a real impact on us? If it does, what factors you're going to see. Okay, well, I'll tell you what, you guys kind of watch for that and let us know if you see us going that way. And if that starts to happen while we start going forward. And so there's a lot of ways to do that. But as a leader, understanding this one aspect about the neuroscience and about the neurotransmitters and how that comes into play with what we've been talking about the last 2 weeks. It's a key aspect that the vast majority of leaders and managers today don't fully understand, but it's a key aspect from how the brain actually works. Because you know what? If you've gotten used to just, and a lot of people in our society think this way, but if you just get into a thing where every time something's not just your way, you're going to kind of, try to get them to shut up, try to knock them down, have them sit down, just don't even talk anymore, all that kind of stuff, you're not getting the job done, and you're not providing the synergism, and you're not providing the potential for radical success and all of that. And so, like I say, those neurotransmitters can cause an issue that a lot of people don't think about. And as a leader, with your team right now, I offer this to people that are listening. As a leader, what do you need to be on the lookout for? What do you need to be aware of? And how do you need to be aware of when something's coming on the scene like that? And not just telling people what to do, but helping your people be aware of that, so that, when they're standing there alone because you were over here watching something or whatever, and something starts to happen, they're aware of what that's happening, and they go, okay, yeah, don't let that make you crazy right yet, kind of thing. And there's some of those kind of things that when you're talking about this aspect of how the brain works and the neuroscience aspect of it, it really does play out when you're talking about leading teams in a fairly unpredictable and rapidly changing environment where not everything fits rote academic superficial thing. So just something to think about when you're talking about that one aspect of neuroscience.
Is there a way, Randy, to identify in your team what stage they're in, whether serotonin is engaged, or whatever it might be?
And the short answer to your question, it's a good question, by the way, and I'll answer it in a slightly humorous way. Okay. But let me ask you this, just with the recording, as Steve, if you were sitting here and you wanted to take me out and this, show me how you'd be kind of showing yourself.
Right around your neck.
You could have some fun with it. But if you think about it, if you see somebody on your team that's starting to play control freak games, or if they sit there and they're starting to kind of do this, and look at their people like this, straight like this, kind of thing, guess what? Norepinephrine is probably kicking in. Or just the opposite. If you see somebody that's just not contributing at all, and they're just leaving and stepping away and going over and sitting down and like this, kind of thing.
Serotonin.
The norepinephrine for the, no, not the serotonin, but the epinephrine for, remember, it's fight or flight. They may be flying away. Now, you might see the same thing with the serotonin. If they sit there and they just kind of go down like this, and they, sit down, and they're not even contributing or being involved or whatever, that could be the serotonin. Guess what? If you see somebody that is trying to connect with somebody else on the team, that could be their oxytocin going on, and that could be that aspect of it. And if you have one person that's not receiving that, you might need to interject a couple of questions. Why aren't you? What makes you not want to be part of his team? And guess what? If this person's trying to play control freak games and not be part of the team, you may not want them on your team anymore. And then the other one is dopamine fix. If you see somebody that is completely, totally talking about themselves, nobody else, they're just talking about themselves, they're patting themselves on the back, they're just kind of, in a sense, in their words, you can kind of see them sort of doing this, kind of thing, and everything. That's probably the dopamine. And what I challenge the leaders that are listening is this. If you see subtle insights in your team members where they're sort of being driven by one of those, what questions you need to ask? How do you need to connect them with them? Because, you got to realize that when you're talking about developing that true synergism, that's not about being exactly the same way. It's not, you just do it our way and leave it at that. Now, is there a sense where you got to kind of be doing it sort of the same way in general? Yeah. But does that mean that every person has to do it precisely the same way? Maybe not, because you may have unexpected factors coming on. And so having an enhanced and increased clarity on whether that's oneness in your team right now or whether that's not, whether it's assisting oneness in your team. And that doesn't mean just do everything exactly the same and shut your brain off. But doing that in such a way where as a team, we truly move forward. And you know what? We can anticipate and we can respond correctly when unexpected factors come on scene. Guess what? All of that is part of it. But as a leader, those are some things you got to be thinking about if you understand that brain aspect of it and the neurotransmitters that it does.
Well, I want to go back to what you said before. If I wanted to take you out right now, this would be some proof of it. This was actually a bunch of men hanging out with last night. And it's like, let's go play football in a parking lot. And
there you go.
I was, it was 3-second hold. So one is coming at me and I'm like, got him. And I'm starting to fall over and I have slightly funky ankle and I didn't want to go that way. So I was like, I'm going to fall this way right onto that curb. And there it was.
Yeah.
But I'm sure, to your point, at that moment, that chemical was released where I'm stopping him. That's it. And we both went down. And of course he kept running after that.
Yeah. But you know what? That's all the aspect of it. And like I say, when you're talking about this concept of true synergism, where it's not just we all do it and think exactly the same way and all that. Now,
right.
Do you want to be thinking aligned in the direction that your team is going? Yes. But the fact that you're all thinking exactly the same way with the rote academic superficial answers and statements, and nothing else can happen. This is just the way it is. Guess what? In the real world, that doesn't always happen that way.
Mm.
And can you truly develop your team in such a way where every team member is truly growing, not academically necessarily, but growing in their ability, in their vision, aware of the neurotransmitters and aware of sometimes when they release, say, some oxytocin and some norepinephrine, perhaps. Which of those do I need to lean to right now? Or if it's causing norepinephrine, where it's causing you to fire up on something when it's not the right time, what are you going to do? How are you going to respond to that? And so understanding those aspects of it when you're talking about what we've been talking about for the last 2 weeks or so, that is just a key insight to understand that aspect of it, that a lot of people in our world today don't fully understand. And that's why I'm very honored and happy to bring neuroscience knowledge as well as coaching and leadership and all of that sort of stuff. So, yeah.
All can be found in your book just out recently, coachingforrelevance.com. Start the conversation. No big sales pitch. You got a question about your team, about the science. There it is. Bring freedom to potential. Yeah.
And the subtitle is The Story of Overcoming and Soaring Above the Storms in Life.
And the subtitle is I'll meet you in the parking lot and let's play football.
There you go.
Randy, always great talking with you. Fascinating to learn all about this, the science aspect, because this is what drives us. And I appreciate you being here. We'll catch up next time.
I look forward to it, Steve. You take care, okay?
You too. We are coming right back.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
Mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.